first, before anything else falls, indicating core column damage first, not trusses pulling away from the perimeter columns. Now take a look at this from the same tower from the bottom, noting the violence underneath the mushroom cloud. The collapse is supposed to be occurring way up here, but down below, as you'll see in this second run, incredible quantities of squibs, explosions bursting out. And on the third time, I'd like to direct your attention to this racing series of explosions down the right side in the corner of this building, about 40 stories below the collapsing building. It gets painfully obvious after a while, doesn't it?
The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the
Note these multiple nodes of these independent explosions. It's a little different than the North Tower, but it's still incredibly the same after a while, after all of these explosions developed. Do we have a straight-down symmetrical progression of collapse outside the footprint? We had a 207-foot wide building. FEMA tells us, and you can see in this document, that we have a 1,200-foot debris field, equidistant around each tower. Asymmetrical damage, symmetrical distribution, all through the site, in fact, and beyond. Do we have squibs, or these mistimed explosions? Some believe that these might be appropriately timed explosions. Whatever.
In all the videos of the collapses, explosions can be seen bursting from the building 20 to 30 stories below the demolition wave. Here, 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 and here.
Now NIST tells us that these are puffs of air being produced by the collapsing building pushing air down the hoistway like a piston. It's got to come out somewhere, right? Well, first of all, these are not puffs of air. They're pulverized building materials. And they occur at 160 to 200 feet, some of them, per second. These velocities are propelled by explosives. 20, 40, and 60 stories below. How can the piston be producing all of that? And in fact, there are these focalized ejections that occur halfway between the corners of the building. Also, if say this was the open office space, right, 60 feet long, the elevator hoistway is over here. The piston's going to shove the air into this room. It's going to fill the room fairly uniformly with air pressure before it breaks any windows, right? And then it might break several, but not these highly focalized, pinpoint accurate, geometrically precise, violent ejections. No, it's extremely unlikely. But let's look at a couple of them here.
As the south tower begins to explode, we track two squibs near the bottom of the frame. They shoot out quickly at first, then slow and merge in with the rest of the dust cloud. Using the first few data points, we see the first squib shoots out at 44.98 meters per second, or about 100 miles per hour. Doing the same for the second squib, we get a speed of 56.3 meters per second, which works out closer to 126 miles per hour.
126 miles per hour of almost instant ejection velocity? Does fire create that? Do we have a near freefall pace through the path of greatest resistance? Let's take a look.
Galileo's law of falling bodies calculates the time in which an object will travel a certain distance in complete freefall. Distance, d, equals 16.8 times time in seconds squared. The South Tower was 1,362 feet tall. 1362 equals 16.08 times 84.7, or 9.2 seconds. The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed.
What are we talking about here? Let's just try to put this in perspective with this story problem. We have a 15-story building which we hold with this crane over 95 stories of nothing but air. No resistance, right? Just air resistance. Next to it, another 15-story building held over a 95-story building with, say, 80,000 tons of structural steel in it. Now we're going to pull the lever on these cranes and drop them both at once. I brought a 95-story building with me today. And we're going to just test this theory of NIST's. I've got two 15-story buildings. We've got 80,000 tons of structural steel in this one right here. And we got air resistance here. So let's try it, okay? We'll put them both up here. We'll even give a little bit of impact load too, okay? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh my God! The one without any resistance under it hit the ground first at virtually free fall speed. This doesn't take much, does it? What happened over here? The building above it met resistance. Through the energy of deformation, it came to a halt. In fact, you'll find on our website, ae911truth.org, that Ken Cutler and Gordon Ross produced these papers, and they show and calculate that, in fact, the building's downward momentum would have been almost immediately arrested. That where is the 15-story building that was driving this building down to the ground at free fall speed? In the first 2 seconds, you saw it reduce half of its mass. It was blown outside. It couldn't have been used to influence the downward progression of the building. In the next 2 seconds, after 4 seconds totally, it's destroyed itself. There's nothing crushing the building. It's tearing itself apart at free fall speed. And it's dismembering the steel structure. In fact, the leading edge of these mushroom clouds are full of perimeter columns, aluminum cladding, and other steel. Let's take a look at the South Tower in terms of dismemberment. See what's going on here. South Tower's on your left. It was hit lower by the aircraft, and as you can see, its descent starts, its rapid destruction starts there, and it begins to tilt to the left. Now, in fact, and it disappears into this cloud. We would expect to see this building, which is already tilted at 22 degrees and continuing its angular momentum, off-center of the building below it. How can it crush it symmetrically at free fall speed when it's already off-center? We don't see it either mangled up in some heap at the bottom down on the pavement. It's been completely dismembered. Let's take a look from below, though, because I'm not quite convinced. We have asymmetrical damage, and yet there's this symmetrical destruction occurring underneath the cloud all the way around the building like the firemen saw, even though this top mass has already fallen over. Free fall speed. Doesn't make sense to me. Steel frame structure was completely dismembered. There are no large chunks of building, only those shards that we saw of the perimeter structure. Does it look like a gravitational collapse to you? Do we have a lateral ejection of structural steel? Let's take a look.
Now let's look at the collapse of the Twin Towers. We are seeing explosions rather than implosions, a first in demolition history. A sequenced rumble becomes a roar as debris is thrown outward. The damage is not contained.